They say time heals every wound, but that's a lie. Because when your fated mate crashes your mating ceremony, growls, "You're carrying my heir," and you've never even met before, time stops. Tonight, you'll hear the story of Dahlia Ravencross, the rejected Omega who built a new life, only to have the Alpha King tear it apart in front of the entire pack. What she doesn't know yet is that his betrayal wasn't born of pride, but of a deadly secret powerful enough to destroy them both. 2 climaxes, 1 destiny, the crash that changed everything, and the confrontation that will decide it all. Before we dive in, drop your location in the comments. Let's see where our pack is watching from tonight. And if you love stories where rejection turns to redemption, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a full-length werewolf shifter romance from the Alpha's romance library. Now, let's begin. The moon hung low over Ashwood territory, heavy and silver like a promise she wasn't sure she wanted. Dahlia Ravencross knelt in the moonflower garden, fingertips brushing petals that only bloomed under darkness. The air smelled of damp earth and pine resin, and somewhere far off a wolf howled, a reminder of a world that kept moving even when her own heart refused. For 8 quiet months she had lived among these people, invisible, the strange Omega who'd wandered into their pack borders half-starved and half-haunted. They didn't ask questions. She didn't offer answers. She worked in the greenhouses, translated trade contracts for the beta, and kept her eyes down whenever anyone looked too closely. The whispers followed her anyway. That's her. The one who came from nowhere. She doesn't even have a scent mark. Maybe she's cursed. Dahlia pretended not to hear. She pressed her palms into the cool soil, grounding herself the way the healer had taught her. Inhale. Exhale. You're safe now. The night wind teased the hem of her pale dress. For a moment she imagined it was a hand, his hand, ghosting across her skin. Her pulse stuttered, and before she could stop herself, her fingers lifted to her wrist. There, hidden beneath a leather bracelet, burned the faint crescent moon scar that never fully faded. It tingled when the bond stirred, a reminder she could never outrun. She closed her eyes. Don't think of him. Don't think of the eyes that once looked straight through you. But the memory rose anyway. Golden light flashing across marble floors, the echo of his voice, the way her name had never once passed his lips. 8 months, and still her chest tightened like it had happened yesterday. She shifted her hand to her belly, just barely rounded beneath the fabric. 12 weeks. Small enough that no one noticed, yet. The healer said another month and she'd have to stop hiding behind aprons and loose shirts. A small, fierce smile tugged at her mouth. No one knew. Not Tobias, not the pack, not a soul. And that was exactly how she wanted it. This tiny heartbeat was hers, her secret, her reason to keep breathing. Behind her, the lanterns along the path flickered as footsteps approached. Dahlia wiped her hands quickly on her skirt and turned. Tobias Ashwood, tall and broad-shouldered, carried the easy authority of a beta born to lead. His voice was low, kind. Still awake? The moonflowers won't vanish if you sleep, you know. She forced a small laugh. Old habits. I like the quiet. Tobias's eyes softened. Tomorrow's a big day. You should rest. Tomorrow. The words landed like stones in her stomach. Tomorrow she was to stand under the elder oak and bind herself to him. Not for love, but for safety. For belonging. A chosen bond, not a fated one. And maybe, if she said the vows loud enough, it would drown out the echo of a voice she could never forget. I will, she said. Just needed a moment. He nodded, studying her face like he wanted to ask more, but chose silence instead. That was what she liked about him. He never pushed. When he finally walked away, the night swallowed the sound of his steps. Dahlia sank back to her knees. She touched one of the blooms, its petals glowing faintly blue in the moonlight. "You'll be born under a full moon," she whispered to the life inside her. "I'll make sure you never know fear. Never." The baby shifted, a soft flutter beneath her ribs. She smiled through the ache in her throat. From somewhere deep in the forest came another howl. Long, commanding, achingly familiar. It rolled through her bones like thunder. Her heart tripped. That sound. No, it couldn't be. He was hundreds of miles away, in his castle of glass and gold. He'd chosen another, forgotten her name, buried their bond. Still. The scar on her wrist flared hot, and the faint shimmer of the moonflowers around her pulsed as though answering an unseen call. Dahlia pressed her trembling hand to her belly. "It's just the wind," she whispered, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. But the forest seemed to hold its breath, and in the quiet she could almost hear it. Deep, resonant, unmistakable. His voice echoing through her mind like a memory refusing to die. Soon. The petals folded closed as if in fear, and Dahlia looked up at the moon, its silver light cold against her skin. Tomorrow she would walk into a new life, bind herself to another man, and pretend the past was gone. But somewhere, beneath that calm surface, the bond she thought she'd buried had begun to stir, like a ghost in the garden, waiting for the right moment to rise again. The Continental Summit wasn't just a meeting of alphas, it was a parade of power. Banners from a dozen territories hung in the glass-domed hall, each marked with symbols of dominion, claws, moons, and crowns. Dahlia moved among them like a ghost, unnoticed in her translator's uniform of gray linen and silence. Her task was simple: interpret trade negotiations for the lesser packs who could barely afford a seat at the table. She spoke 6 languages fluently, 7 if you counted the one no one acknowledged anymore, the ancient tongue of the first wolves. Words were her gift, her shield, and her curse. Words could connect or destroy, and she had learned long ago that speaking too freely could cost an Omega everything. So she listened. She smiled when spoken to. She became background noise. That was before he entered. The heavy doors opened with a hush that silenced the hall. Alpha King Caspian Thornwood didn't need to roar to command attention. Power followed him like a storm cloud. Broad-shouldered, dressed in black. His golden eyes caught the light like molten metal. The air itself shifted, alive with dominance. Dahlia's pen slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. He shouldn't have noticed her. She was nothing, an Omega among kings. But when she bent to pick it up, his gaze found her across the crowd. And in that instant, the world broke open. The mate bond slammed into her with brutal clarity, heat spreading through her veins, heartbeat sinking to his. For a heartbeat she forgot to breathe. Caspian's pupils dilated, the golden light inside them flared. Recognition, disbelief, then horror. He took one involuntary step toward her, and stopped. His expression hardened into marble. Then he turned away as if she had never existed. Dahlia's breath caught. She waited for something, anything, a word, a sign, a rejection. But there was only silence. The king resumed his conversation, voice cool and detached. Around him, courtiers resumed their laughter. Around her, life went on. She felt the bond hum beneath her skin, raw and unfulfilled, and bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood. By the second day, she had convinced herself it was a mistake, a cruel trick of fate. He hadn't even looked at her again. She translated treaties, handed out parchments, and avoided mirrors because every time she saw her reflection, she saw the girl who wasn't good enough to be claimed. On the 3rd night, a knock sounded on her chamber door. 3 soft taps, deliberate. Her heart lurched. No one visited the translator's quarters. "Who is it?" Silence. Then the scent, cedar, storm rain, and something primal, rolled through the crack as the door opened. Caspian stood there, half in shadow. Every inch the monarch she should have bowed to. But she couldn't move. "This changes nothing," he said, voice rougher than she expected. "Then why are you here?" His jaw tightened. "Because I can't sleep. Because your scent is in my blood and it's driving me insane." Before she could answer, he closed the distance between them. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was the collision of two souls fighting what they both knew was impossible. Sparks ignited beneath her skin. The bond sang in triumph and agony. When he pulled away, he whispered, "I shouldn't have come." "Then don't," she said, though her voice trembled. But he did come, again and again. Every night for the rest of the summit, he returned. Always after midnight, always with that same warning. "This changes nothing." Yet every touch changed everything. They spoke in whispers, between gasps and confessions. She learned he hated politics, that he had lost his mother to assassination, that he carried his crown like a curse. He learned she dreamed in languages no one spoke anymore. On the 7th night, dawn crept pale through the window. Caspian sat at the edge of her bed, fingers tracing the curve of her wrist where the crescent moon scar would soon appear. "My kingdom needs an alliance," he murmured. "A union with power behind it. You would make me weak." She flinched as if struck. "Then why come here at all?" He didn't answer. He only looked at her the way dying men look at sunlight. "Forgive me," he said finally, voice raw, "for what I'm about to do." Before she could ask, he was gone. The door closed softly behind him, leaving the scent of storm rain and the echo of a promise he never made. That night, Dahlia dreamed of moonflowers wilting under golden light, and when she woke, her wrist burned where his touch had been, marked by a crescent scar that would never fade. She told herself it was over. She told herself she'd forget him. But the bond didn't listen. It waited, silent and patient, for the day he would break her completely. The summit continued, glittering and venomous. Every corridor reeked of dominance and deceit, but in the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, the world shrank to the size of her room, and the sound of his heartbeat against hers. Caspian came when the palace slept, always cloaked, always silent. He never said her name. He never had to. The bond spoke for them both. The first night had been hunger. The second was surrender. By the third, it was something neither could name. They were fire and shadow, defying every rule written for wolves like them. When he touched her, Dahlia forgot the gulf of rank and power between them. The Alpha King and the nameless Omega, no one would have believed it if they'd seen. But behind those doors, crowns meant nothing. He was just Caspian. She was just his. He tried to keep his mask of control, but she saw through it. The way his hands trembled when he unfastened his shirt. The way his breath caught whenever she whispered, "Stay." Every morning he left before sunrise, leaving the sheets cold and her heart colder. During the day, Dahlia carried on with her duties as if her nights weren't filled with sin and stolen vows. The courtiers never noticed her. The bond burned beneath her skin, a secret fire that made her cheeks flush whenever his shadow crossed the hall. On the 5th night, he came to her room without words. His eyes were dark, haunted. She didn't ask why. She simply reached for him. But after, as they lay tangled in silence, she dared to whisper, "Why do you keep coming back if I mean nothing to you?" He stared at the ceiling. "Because you do. That's the problem." "Then stop fighting it." He turned to her, pain flickering behind his golden eyes. "You don't understand. I can't choose you. If I do, everything I've built, my throne, my pack's safety, it all burns. Her heart splintered. So I'm just a secret then? A mistake to forget when the sun rises? He didn't answer. His silence was its own confession. Dahlia sat up, pulling the sheet around her shoulders like armor. Then don't come again. Whatever this is, it's killing me. He rose slowly, pulling on his shirt. You think it isn't killing me? His voice cracked, softer now. Every night, I swear I won't return. And every night, I do. The room filled with silence, the kind that feels alive. Finally, he said, "One more night. Let me have one more." She should have said no. She should have thrown him out. But when he reached for her, she folded. Love makes fools of even the strongest souls. The seventh night was different. No rush, no hunger, only inevitability. The bond thrummed between them like a heartbeat neither could silence. His touch was reverent, almost desperate, as though he were memorizing her. "Promise me something," she whispered, voice trembling. "When this ends, and it will, don't pretend I never existed." Caspian cupped her face, thumb tracing her bottom lip. "You'll hate me before it's over. Then let me hate you honestly." He smiled, sad and beautiful. "You're the first person who's ever seen me without my crown. Do you know what that means?" She shook her head. "It means I'll destroy you if I don't walk away now." He kissed her like a dying man saying goodbye to life. When dawn broke, she woke to an empty bed and a note pressed beneath her hand. Only 4 words, written in his precise script. "Forgive me for this." By midday, the entire palace was buzzing with rumors. The Alpha King had summoned the leaders for an announcement. Dahlia's heart sank as she dressed for work, the scar on her wrist pulsing like fire. She stood in the hall when he entered, taller, colder, every inch the sovereign again. He didn't glance her way. When he spoke, his voice carried over the marble floors like thunder. "The Thornwood Kingdom will unite with the Silverfang Pack through marriage," he declared. "The ceremony will take place within the month." Lyra Silverfang stepped forward, radiant, predatory, wearing the smug smile of a woman who believed she'd won. Dahlia's vision blurred. The crowd cheered. Caspian didn't flinch. Their bond screamed inside her chest, shredding what was left of her heart. She turned away before anyone saw her tears. That night she packed what little she owned. The sheets still smelled like him. She stripped them from the bed and burned them. The smoke curled through the window, carrying her heartbreak to the moon itself. When she finally stepped out of the palace gates, she whispered into the cold, "You wanted me to hate you, Caspian Thornwood. Congratulations." The wind carried no answer, only the faint echo of a howl, so distant it could have been a memory. And just like that, Dahlia vanished into the night, leaving behind a king who'd condemned himself without even realizing it. The summit's final evening gleamed with gold and deceit. Torches lined the marble courtyard. Banners rippled above 1,000 guests, and the scent of power hung thick as perfume. Dahlia stayed at the back of the crowd, invisible in her gray uniform. Her fingers ached from clutching the parchment she was supposed to deliver, but she couldn't move. At the center dais, Caspian Thornwood stood like a statue carved from midnight. A crown of onyx rested on his head. His expression was unreadable. The last time she'd seen those eyes, they'd been warm against her skin. Tonight, they were winter. Lyra Silverfang approached him in shimmering silver silk, hair braided with diamond pins. She smiled like victory. The court musicians struck a note that sliced through Dahlia's chest. "Tonight," the herald proclaimed, "our Alpha King binds the Thornwood Kingdom to the Silverfang Pack through a sacred alliance of blood." A murmur of approval rolled through the hall. Dahlia felt it under her feet, like an earthquake swallowing her whole. Her heart screamed no, but her body stood frozen. Caspian lifted the collar, white gold studded with runes of promise. It glinted cruelly in the firelight. When he placed it around Lyra's throat, the audience erupted in applause. The bond inside Dahlia convulsed, tearing through every nerve. She bit her lip until she tasted iron. No one saw the Omega collapse against a pillar, clutching her wrist where the crescent moon scar burned red hot. She staggered out of the hall before her knees gave way, the applause fading behind her like a nightmare that refused to end. Down the corridor, empty, cold, merciless marble. Her breath echoed. Each step sounded like a goodbye. Dahlia. His voice froze her mid-stride. She turned. He was there, still in his ceremonial coat, crown in his hand, eyes stripped bare of every lie. "You knew this was coming," he said quietly. "Did I?" Her voice cracked. "You came to me every night. You touched me, held me, promised me nothing, and I was foolish enough to think it meant something." Caspian's jaw tightened. "I told you what I am. A king cannot choose freely. My pack." "Your pack? You mean your throne?" Her laugh was soft and broken. "You could have rejected me." "At least that would have been honest." "I couldn't." "Because it would have hurt your pride?" "Because it would have killed you." The words landed between them like thunder. For a moment, neither spoke. She blinked through tears. "Killed me?" He looked away. "There are things you don't know. Prophecies, bloodlines, curses that—" "Stop." She held up a trembling hand. "Don't you dare feed me excuses now. You made your choice. Go to your queen." He took a step closer, regret flickering behind gold. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why did you?" His answer was a whisper. "Because I was afraid." Something inside her snapped. She slapped him. The sound cracked through the corridor. His head jerked to the side. He didn't retaliate. He simply stood there, breathing hard, eyes glistening. Dahlia's palms stung, but she felt lighter. "That," she said, "was for every night you made me believe I mattered." She turned and walked away, each footstep echoing like a drumbeat of defiance. Behind her, Caspian whispered her name once, raw, pleading, but she didn't look back. Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft flakes swirling under the moonlight. The air bit at her lungs as she crossed the courtyard. The world beyond the palace walls was wild, uncertain, but at least it was hers. By the time dawn touched the spires, she had vanished. The guards said an Omega in gray had taken the northern trail. No one pursued. The Alpha King sealed the gates before sunrise. The summit ended. Inside his chambers, Caspian sat in silence. Lyra's diamond collar glittered on the table beside him. Cold, perfect, meaningless. He lifted his hand to his mouth and inhaled. The faintest trace of moonflower still lingered on his skin. In the distance, a lone wolf howled, low and mournful. He closed his eyes. "Forgive me," he whispered to the empty room. But the echo that answered was not forgiveness, only the hollow cry of something sacred shattering beyond repair. The snow didn't stop for 3 days after Dahlia left the summit. Each flake seemed to whisper her name as it fell, as though the moon itself mourned for her. She traveled until her legs gave out, crossing frozen rivers and silent pine forests. By the time she reached neutral territory, she was little more than a ghost, skin pale, eyes hollow, soul scraped raw. For weeks she drifted from town to town, taking translation work wherever she could find it. Merchant contracts, border treaties, anything to pay for bread and warmth. She spoke to no one unless necessary. She didn't even tell healers her name. the bond had gone quiet. That silence was worse than pain. Sometimes, in dreams, she still felt Caspian's presence like a phantom hand over her heart. But when she woke, there was only the emptiness of exile. It wasn't until the morning the nausea began that she realized something was wrong. She was sitting at her desk in the small attic room she rented above a tailor's shop when the world tilted. The scent of ink made her stomach lurch. She barely made it to the wash basin before retching. The next morning, it happened again. And again. At first she thought it was stress or spoiled food. But when the dizziness worsened, she forced herself to a healer. A kind, gray-haired woman who worked out of a quiet cottage at the edge of the neutral town of Whitestone. The healer's hands were gentle but knowing. Her eyes softened with something between pity and awe. "My dear," she said finally, "you're with child." The words didn't register at first. Dahlia blinked at her. "That's impossible." The healer smiled faintly. "About 6 weeks along, maybe a little more. 2 heartbeats. 2? Twins." The air left Dahlia's lungs. The world narrowed to a single, impossible truth. Twins. Caspian's children. Her hands trembled so badly the healer had to steady her. "Are you all right, love?" Dahlia's throat burned. She wanted to scream, to laugh, to crumble. Instead, she whispered, "He doesn't know, and he never will." The healer's brows drew together. "Their father?" Dahlia nodded once. "He made his choice. I'm making mine." When she stepped outside, the afternoon light was blinding. She wrapped her arms around her stomach, still flat but no longer empty. A strange calm settled over her. Fear, yes, but beneath it, something fierce, protective. For the first time since she left him, she had a reason to live. That night she sat by the fire and wrote a letter. She didn't address it, didn't even sign her name. She wrote it only to burn it afterward. "You'll never know them, Caspian Thornwood. Not their names, not their faces. You'll never hear them laugh or see them shift under a full moon. You'll never touch the lives you threw away. They are mine now, mine to protect. And you'll remain only a ghost that lives in my blood." The flame consumed the paper. She watched it curl and turn to ash. Days later, a messenger arrived from Ashwood Pack, a beta named Tobias looking for someone who could translate ancient border laws. "We pay fairly," he said, "and our lands are quiet. Safe. Safe." The word rooted itself inside her like prayer. She followed him north, into the valley of moonlit trees and stone cottages, far from royal politics and courts. The Ashwood Pack wasn't wealthy or powerful, but its people were kind. Tobias especially. He didn't pry when she gave only her first name. He didn't ask why her eyes looked older than her years. He simply offered work and a small cottage near the greenhouse. As winter melted into spring, her strength returned. She worked with the healers, taught young wolves how to read, and spent her evenings in the garden where moonflowers bloomed under her care. The nausea faded. Her belly grew. Her heart, though scarred, began to heal. Sometimes, when she felt the twins stir, she'd whisper, "You're free. You'll never be pawns in anyone's game, not even his." But late at night, when the wind howled through the pines, she would lie awake and remember the sound of his voice, the one she swore she'd forget. And though she didn't know it, miles away in a glass-walled castle, the Alpha King woke gasping in the dark that same night, clutching his chest as if something long buried had just begun to breathe again. Spring came softly to Ashwood Valley, draping the forests in green and scenting the wind with new life. For the first time in months, Dahlia woke without the crushing weight of nightmares. The garden behind her cottage was alive with moonflowers and lavender, and the faint hum of bees replaced the echo of palace applause she could never forget. Ashwood was not like Thornwood. Here, wolves lived simply. No crowns, no courts, no endless hierarchy of power. The alpha was older, gentle with his people. The beta, Tobias Ashwood, had become her quiet anchor. He never pried into her past, never demanded explanations for the shadow that sometimes crossed her face. He only asked if she'd eaten, if she was warm enough, if she'd slept. Small things. Human things. Dahlia hadn't realized how much kindness could ache until she felt it again. Her mornings began before dawn, translating old records in the pack library or helping Tobias with trade correspondence. He'd learned quickly that her language skills were unmatched. She could decode any dialect, any rune. "You're wasted in the garden," he said once with a grin. "You should be teaching at the Alpha's hall." "I like the garden," she replied softly. "It listens when I talk." He laughed then, that deep, warm sound that made others trust him instantly. "Then I'll make sure you always have one." When he found out she was pregnant, it happened by accident. She'd been pruning herbs when a sharp cramp bent her double. Tobias was nearby and caught her before she hit the ground. The scent hit him first, unmistakably maternal. His eyes widened. "Dahlia, you're expecting." There was no judgment in his tone, only quiet surprise. She straightened, brushing soil from her dress. "Yes." "The father?" She met his gaze steadily. "Gone. He doesn't know. And he never will." He studied her for a long moment. Then he simply nodded. "Then we'll make sure you're not alone." From that day forward, Tobias made her safety his responsibility. He assigned guards to patrol near her cottage at night and ensured the pack healer visited weekly. He brought her fresh fruit, blankets when the nights were cold, and books from the library that smelled of cedar and age. If she protested, he only smiled. "I promise to keep my people safe. That includes you." Slowly, almost against her will, Dahlia began to feel something she hadn't in months. Peace. The nightmares faded, replaced by the rhythmic pulse of the 2 tiny heartbeats inside her. When she worked in the garden, the twins seemed to move with her rhythm, fluttering under her ribs like secret laughter. Sometimes she'd pause, hand over her belly, and whisper, "We're doing okay, aren't we?" They always answered with a gentle kick. By the 10th week, the curve of her stomach was undeniable. Tobias noticed, of course, but never once treated her differently. If anything, he grew more protective. When whispers began, because whispers always did, he silenced them with a single look. One evening, they sat outside her cottage watching the sunset paint the mountains in firelight. Tobias broke the silence first. "The ceremony," he said quietly. "The Alpha insists I take a mate before winter. It's tradition for succession." She smiled faintly. "You'll make someone very happy." He shook his head. "I was hoping it could be you." Her breath caught. "Me?" He nodded, eyes earnest. "Not for love. At least, not yet. For safety. A chosen bond. Your children would carry my name, my protection. No one would question their place." Dahlia looked away, heart pounding. "You deserve someone whole, Tobias. I'm not that. You're strong. You survived. That's more than most." He paused, voice gentler. "Think about it." That night, she sat by the window long after the candles burned low. Outside, moonlight shimmered across the garden. The twins shifted softly beneath her hand as though waiting for her answer. By morning, she had one. When Tobias arrived with breakfast, she met his gaze and said, "I'll do it. For them." He smiled, relief and quiet joy in his eyes. "Then we'll make it official on the winter solstice." The days that followed were filled with small, careful happiness. Tobias never touched her without asking, never crossed the invisible line she'd drawn. He respected her scars, her silences. In another life, maybe she could have loved him fully. But every time the wind shifted from the north, bringing the faint scent of storm rain and cedar, something deep in her chest tightened. A ghost of a bond she thought had died would flicker awake. She would close her eyes, whisper to the night, "Not again. Stay buried." But the bond didn't listen. And somewhere beyond the mountains, the Alpha King who had tried to forget her woke each morning with her name on his tongue, unaware that the life he'd abandoned was about to call him home. The Thornwood castle had never felt colder. Weeks after the summit, the halls that once rang with command and purpose were suffocatingly silent. The courtiers spoke in whispers now, afraid to say what everyone knew but dared not voice. The Alpha King was losing control. Caspian Thornwood had been many things in his life. Disciplined, ruthless, unyielding, but never weak. Until now. Lyra Silverfang, his new fiancée, paraded through the court like she already wore the crown. She dismissed servants with a snap of her jeweled fingers, replaced trusted advisors with her father's spies, and smiled at Caspian with venom-sweet charm. "You could at least pretend to be happy," she purred one morning as they sat before the council. He didn't answer. He didn't even look at her. The council droned on about trade routes and border treaties, but he couldn't focus. Every word blurred into a haze. Every parchment he signed seemed to echo her handwriting. Dahlia's, looping and elegant. He still caught her scent sometimes, faint and haunting, though he'd ordered her name erased from every record of the summit. That night, he woke to the sound of rain against his window and realized his hand had clenched into a fist around the bedsheet. The scent that filled his senses wasn't Lyra's. It was moonflowers. The bond he had buried was stirring, restless. For months he had told himself he'd done the right thing, protected her from the curse that clung to his bloodline. His mother had died because of it. His father had gone mad trying to fight it. No fated mate of a Thornwood king had survived more than a year. He'd sworn he would end the cycle, even if it meant shattering his own heart. But now, alone in the dark, the bond pulsed faintly like an old wound reopening. Something was wrong. "Marcus," he called. His beta appeared in the doorway within moments, loyal as always, though even Marcus looked worn from months of his king's decline. "You called, my lord?" "Find her." Marcus hesitated. "Find who?" Caspian's jaw tightened. "You know who." "My king, with respect. You ordered the trackers to stand down months ago. You said she was to be forgotten." His golden eyes snapped up, molten with barely leashed rage. "Do I look like a man who's forgotten?" Marcus bowed his head. "No, my lord." "Then find her," Caspian said quietly. "Alive and unharmed." It took weeks. Reports came and went, false leads, vague sightings. Each failure made the palace colder. Lyra grew impatient, her voice sharp with jealousy. "She's an Omega," she spat. "Nothing more. Why do you care where she ran?" Caspian didn't answer her either. He couldn't. Because he knew the truth now. He hadn't just lost her. He'd lost himself the moment she walked away. One stormy night, Marcus entered the throne room, rain dripping from his cloak. His expression was tense. "My king," he said, voice low. "We found her." Caspian rose so fast the chair scraped against the marble. "Where?" "Ashwood territory. She's alive. Well, and there's something else." Caspian's heart slammed once, hard. "Say it." Marcus hesitated, then forced the words out. "She's pregnant." Silence, the kind that swallows everything. Caspian's breath caught. "Pregnant." Marcus nodded. "The locals say she's under the protection of Beta Tobias Ashwood. They believe the children are his." The king's claws tore through the armrest of his throne before he realized it. The scent of ozone filled the air as his wolf surged beneath his skin, furious and raw. She's carrying someone else's pups? He growled. The entire room trembled with his fury, but even as he said it, something inside him whispered, "No." The bond hummed faintly, unmistakable. It recognized what his mind refused to accept. His children. His heir. He gripped the edge of the throne, knuckles white. "The bond is awakening," he said under his breath. "It's calling me back." Lyra appeared at the doorway, her tone mocking. "So the great Alpha King is haunted by a ghost and her bastards. How romantic." Caspian turned slowly. "Leave," he said, voice deadly calm. She opened her mouth to speak again, but the look in his eyes made her freeze. "Caspian." "I said leave." When the doors closed behind her, he stood in the empty hall, trembling with something deeper than rage. Regret, love, need, all tangled together until he could barely breathe. He'd tried to live without her, but the bond had never truly severed. It had only gone dormant, waiting for the right moment to strike. Now it had awakened, and it whispered the same truth over and over. "Go to her." He stripped off his ceremonial collar and threw it across the room. The runes on it shattered with a sound like breaking glass. "Prepare the royal guard," he said to Marcus, voice cold steel once more. "We ride for Ashwood by sunrise." The winter solstice arrived, cloaked in silver frost and quiet expectation. Ashwood Valley glittered beneath the pale moon, every rooftop dusted with snow, every window glowing with warm candlelight. It should have felt like peace. Instead, Dahlia's heart thrummed with unease she couldn't explain. Her cottage was full of voices that morning, healers, seamstresses, packwomen carrying bolts of white silk. They pinned flowers into her hair, adjusted the lace along her simple gown, whispered blessings for new beginnings. The air smelled of lavender and moonflowers, the same flowers that had once bloomed outside her window in Thornwood. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her skin had color again. Her eyes, once hollow, held a quiet resolve. The small swell of her belly, now unmistakable, curved softly beneath the fabric. Tobias's name would protect the children. His kindness would guard them. That was all that mattered. "You look beautiful," said a familiar voice behind her. Dahlia turned. Tobias stood in the doorway, dressed in ceremonial gray, the beta's mark embroidered on his chest. He looked strong, steady, everything she had prayed for after the chaos she'd left behind. "Not too much?" she asked softly. He smiled. "Just enough. You don't need gold or jewels to outshine anyone." Her lips curved faintly. "Thank you for all of this." "You don't have to thank me." His tone was gentle but firm. "You're part of this pack now. And after tonight, no one will ever question that again." When he left, Dahlia sat for a long time in front of the mirror. Outside, the pack gathered beneath the great elder oak where generations had pledged their bonds. Torches burned bright in the snow, their flames reflecting off the frozen river. Children laughed, wolves howled in greeting. It should have felt like belonging. Instead, the air felt heavy, charged with something she couldn't name. The twins stirred restlessly under her hand. "Easy," she whispered. "It's just nerves." But a chill ran through her all the same. As dusk fell, she walked with Tobias to the ceremonial grove. The crowd parted, smiles warm, respectful. Every step toward the altar felt both like freedom and farewell. The healer began the invocation, voice low and rhythmic. Under the gaze of the moon goddess, two souls stand to bind their fates by choice, not destiny. Tobias took her hand. His touch was steady, grounding. "You don't have to do this," he murmured so only she could hear. "If you're unsure, we can wait." I want to, she lied gently. You've given me safety when I had nothing else. It's time I stopped running. He nodded, though his eyes searched hers for something she couldn't give. The vows came next. Dahlia repeated them automatically, the words blurring into a hum as the moon rose over the treetops. The air shimmered faintly, as if the forest itself was listening. Then, the wind changed. A sudden gust swept through the grove, extinguishing several torches. The scent of storm rain drifted in, sharp, familiar, wrong. The twins kicked hard as though startled. Dahlia's breath caught. Tobias frowned. You all right? She nodded quickly, though her heart was pounding. The healer continued, unaware, but the wolves in the crowd began to shift uneasily. Heads turned toward the distant tree line. Low growls rippled through the air. Then came the sound. Hooves, dozens of them, thunder rolling closer. And beneath it, a howl, powerful and commanding, a sound no one in Ashwood dared to answer. The crowd froze. Dahlia's blood ran cold. That voice, that sound. It couldn't be. He couldn't be here. The healer stopped mid-prayer. What? The ground trembled. Horses burst from the forest edge, armored wolves flanking them, royal insignias gleaming under the moonlight. The royal guard. The air crackled with fear and awe. Every member of the Ashwood pack dropped to one knee as the lead rider dismounted. His black cloak whipped in the wind. And when he lifted his head, golden eyes blazed through the shadows. Caspian Thornwood, the Alpha King himself. Dahlia's heart stopped. He strode forward, rain dripping from his armor, his gaze locked on her as if no one else existed. Tobias stepped instinctively between them, his voice sharp. Your Majesty, this is Ashwood territory. You have no right. Caspian's voice rolled like thunder. Step away from her. The entire grove seemed to hold its breath. Dahlia couldn't move. The wind tore through her veil. His scent hit her like lightning, storm and cedar and everything she'd tried to forget. Tobias squared his shoulders. She's under my protection. Caspian's golden eyes burned brighter. She's my mate. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The pack fell silent. Dahlia's heart slammed against her ribs. And then his gaze dropped to her belly. His expression changed. Shock. Recognition. The bond roared awake between them like fire. When he spoke again, the words shattered the world. You're carrying my heir. For a heartbeat, the entire grove went silent. Even the wind stopped moving. The torches flickered weakly in the cold, casting shadows over faces frozen between fear and disbelief. Dahlia couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She could only stare at him, at the Alpha King standing at the edge of the altar, his golden eyes blazing like a second sun in the winter night. Caspian, her mate, her ruin. He took a slow step forward, boots sinking into the snow, each movement radiating command. The royal guard spread behind him in a wall of steel and fur, the crest of Thornwood glinting on their armor. Caspian, she whispered, voice trembling. What are you doing here? The sound of his name on her lips nearly broke him, but he didn't show it. He kept walking, eyes locked on her, until Tobias stepped into his path. She's under my protection, Tobias said firmly, voice steady despite the tension vibrating in the air. Caspian's reply was low and lethal. Then protect her by getting out of my way. The wolves of Ashwood bristled. Dozens shifted into partial form, their growls echoing through the grove. Tobias stood his ground, chest heaving, his aura strong but nowhere near enough to match a king's. This is sacred ground, he said. You have no right to storm in here like this. Caspian's gaze slid past him, back to Dahlia, and to the curve of her belly. His expression faltered for the first time. Something wild and raw flickered behind his eyes. The bond roared to life between them, a pull so strong she almost staggered. "Dahlia," he breathed, voice cracking. "You're carrying my heir." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Every wolf heard him. Every whisper cut through the night like a blade. Tobias turned to her, stunned. What is he talking about? Dahlia's lips parted, but no words came. Her mind spun, trying to catch up with what had just happened. How could he know? She'd hidden it. She'd buried the bond, sealed it with pain and silence. And yet, he knew. The twins kicked hard, responding to the sound of his voice. A soft cry escaped her throat as she pressed a hand to her stomach. The air between them shimmered faintly, invisible energy crackling like lightning. Caspian's jaw tightened. "You thought I wouldn't feel it?" he said hoarsely. Our bond reawakened the moment they quickened. I felt it in my blood, in my dreams. I felt them. Dahlia shook her head, tears blurring her vision. "You forfeited that right when you chose her." His eyes softened with agony. "I never chose her. I chose to protect you." "By destroying me?" He stepped closer. Tobias moved again, blocking him. "You're not welcome here, Thornwood." The title struck like venom. Caspian's wolf surged beneath his skin, power rippling through the air so violently that frost cracked across the ground. "Say that again," he growled, voice vibrating with suppressed rage. The pack instinctively fell to their knees under his aura. Only Tobias and Dahlia remained standing, trembling under the pressure. Tobias's wolf fought to rise, but Caspian's dominance pressed down harder. "Enough," Dahlia cried, stepping between them. Her voice cut through the chaos. "This isn't your kingdom, Caspian." He stopped, breathing ragged. The sight of her, pale skin glowing in the torchlight, white dress clinging to the soft curve of her belly, nearly undid him. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why come after I rebuilt everything?" "Because I couldn't breathe knowing you were out here carrying my children while another man prepared to claim you." His voice cracked. "Because I made the worst mistake of my life, and I'll burn kingdoms to fix it." The words hit like fire and ice. The crowd around them murmured in disbelief. Tobias's eyes darkened with anger. "You had your chance," he said coldly. "She's chosen her future. You don't get to rewrite it because you're lonely." Caspian's gaze flicked toward him, lethal. "You think you can protect her from me?" "I already have," Tobias replied. The tension snapped. Wolves growled. Swords hissed. The air was seconds from violence. But then Dahlia screamed, a sharp, pained sound that froze them both. The twins kicked again, harder this time, and a wave of power rippled through her aura. Caspian's wolf responded instantly, his golden eyes flaring as he felt them, their children, through the bond. He took another step forward, hand outstretched, voice breaking. "They can feel me." Dahlia's breath hitched. "Stay back." "Dahlia, please." The moment stretched thin, fragile as glass. The guards held their breath. Tobias's hand twitched near his weapon. Then, as if the world itself exhaled, the torches flared back to life, flames snapping high. The moon hung above them like a witness. Two mates stood locked in a storm of love, fury, and destiny, while around them, the pack watched the impossible unfold. The ceremony was over. The past had come crashing back, and nothing in Ashwood, or Thornwood, would ever be the same again. The grove had become chaos. Wolves shouted, steel glinted, and power pulsed through the air like lightning caught in a storm. The royal guard formed a half-circle around their king, while Ashwood wolves closed ranks around their beta. In the middle stood Dahlia, barefoot, trembling, her white gown streaked with mud and moonlight. Her breath came in short bursts. Her heart felt like it might burst from her chest. The world had narrowed to the two men before her, Tobias steady and protective, Caspian wild and desperate. "Stop this!" she cried, her voice cracking through the roar of growls. "You'll destroy everything." Caspian's eyes locked on her. "Everything was destroyed the moment I let you walk away." Tobias stepped forward. "She doesn't need your chaos, Thornwood. She has peace now. She has us." Caspian's lips curled. Peace built on a lie isn't peace at all. Dahlia's fists clenched. "You have no right to say that." His voice broke, rough with emotion. "No right. You carry my blood in your womb. Our children, Dahlia. How can you say I have no right?" Her knees almost buckled. The words were daggers, painful because they were true. The twins fluttered in response to his voice again, their heartbeats syncing faintly with his. The bond shimmered, visible to anyone sensitive enough to feel it. Tobias moved between them, his tone low and calm but edged with steel. "You've said enough, Your Majesty. Whatever your mistakes, they end here. She's made her choice." Caspian's control cracked. "Choice? You think this was ever about choice? I gave her none. I tore the bond apart to save her, and I have lived with that agony every damn day since." He looked at Dahlia then, no arrogance, no crown, only a man stripped bare. "Do you want to know why I walked away? Why I pretended you were nothing? Because my bloodline is cursed. Every Thornwood King's mate dies within a year of bonding. My mother, my grandmother, everyone before them. I couldn't bear to lose you the same way." The confession fell into the silence like thunder after lightning. The guards shifted uneasily. Tobias froze, disbelief written across his face. Dahlia's lips trembled. You broke me to protect me?" His jaw tightened. "If hate was the only thing that could keep you alive, then I wanted you to hate me." Her tears fell silently, catching the moonlight as they hit the snow. "And what now? You come back after all this time to claim me? To unmake everything I've built?" "I came because the bond wouldn't let me breathe without you," he said, stepping closer, his voice breaking. "Because I felt them, Dahlia. Our children. Because I'm done living in fear while someone else calls you his." Tobias's voice cut through the moment. "You're too late." Caspian's golden eyes snapped to him, fury reigniting. "You think she belongs to you?" Tobias didn't flinch. "I don't believe in ownership. I believe in choice, and she chose me." Both men turned to her then, waiting. The world seemed to hold its breath. Every eye in the grove was on her, but Dahlia barely felt them. Her pulse pounded in her ears. The mate bond tugged at her like gravity, but another kind of loyalty rooted her feet to the ground. "Tobias gave me safety," she whispered. "You gave me pain. But the truth is..." Her voice cracked. "The truth is, I never stopped loving you, Caspian. I just stopped waiting for you to love me back." Caspian's eyes glistened, a tear slipping down his cheek. "Then let me try now. Let me earn what I destroyed." Tobias turned away, jaw tight. "Don't do this, Dahlia." She looked between them, one man offering peace, the other chaos. Her hand drifted to her stomach where the twins stirred, as if feeling her torment. "They deserve to know their father," Caspian whispered. "Even if you never forgive me." A soft sound escaped her, half sob, half laugh. "You talk about forgiveness as if it's easy. You shattered me, Caspian. You made me into this ghost of a woman who doesn't know where she belongs." "Then let me remind you," he said, taking one final step forward until they stood inches apart. "You belong with me. You always have." The bond surged, wild and electric. The air shimmered with power. The wolves bowed their heads instinctively, overwhelmed by the pull of two souls long denied. Even Tobias stepped back, understanding something ancient was at work. Caspian reached out, slowly, reverently, fingers brushing her cheek. "Please," he whispered, "let me come home." Her tears spilled freely now. "Home?" she echoed. "You are my home. You always were. I just don't know if I can survive it twice." The twins kicked hard between them. Caspian's breath hitched. They can feel it too. Dahlia closed her eyes, torn between the life she'd built and the one that refused to die. The moon rose higher, bathing them in silver light. Around them, the world fell silent again. Two mates, one broken bond, and a choice that would change everything. She opened her eyes at last, voice barely a whisper. "Then you'd better be ready to fight for us, Caspian, because I won't break again." He exhaled shakily, relief and love mixing like fire and rain. "I was born to fight for you." The wind swept through the grove, scattering moonflower petals across the snow. The ceremony torches flickered out, one by one, leaving only the glow of the rising moon and the promise of what came next. Snow fell quietly over Ashwood Valley, muffling the world in white. The grove was empty now. Only scattered petals and footprints remained, half buried beneath the frost. The chaos had faded, leaving silence in its wake. Dahlia stood at the edge of the forest, cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders. The moonlight traced silver along her skin, the same light that had once illuminated her heartbreak and now glowed softly against the beginnings of something fragile and new. Behind her, she could hear Tobias giving orders to his men, restoring order after the night that had nearly torn two packs apart. His voice, steady and calm as always, held no resentment, only quiet sorrow. He would never say it aloud, but Dahlia felt it. He was letting her go. She turned as he approached. The snow crunched under his boots. "You're leaving," he said, not a question. She nodded. "I have to." Tobias looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled faintly. The kind of smile that belonged to someone who'd already accepted his fate. "He'll never deserve you. But maybe he'll try." "He already is," she whispered. He inclined his head in respect. "Then go, before I change my mind and challenge a king." A soft laugh escaped her, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you. For everything. For giving me a home when I didn't have one." "You'll always have one here," Tobias said simply. Then, after a pause, "Take care of them, Dahlia. And take care of yourself." She wanted to say something, anything that could capture the gratitude and ache that filled her chest, but no words came. Instead, she stepped forward and hugged him. Tobias froze for a second, then returned the embrace, brief, strong, final. When she pulled back, she whispered, "Goodbye." And then she turned toward the waiting figure at the tree line. Caspian Thornwood stood there, his black cloak dusted with snow, his golden eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. For once, he wasn't a king or a warrior, just a man who looked utterly undone by love and guilt. He extended his hand. "Ready?" Dahlia glanced back once, at the grove where her past had burned away, and then slipped her fingers into his. The warmth of his touch spread through her like sunlight through frost. They walked together through the woods in silence. The only sounds were the crunch of snow and the steady rhythm of two heartbeats, intertwined, yet uncertain. When they reached the edge of the valley, Caspian stopped. He turned to face her, his expression a mix of awe and agony. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said softly. "But I swear to you, Dahlia, I'll spend the rest of my life earning it. I'll protect you and our children with everything I am, even if it means fighting the curse itself." Dahlia searched his face, the man who had once shattered her world and was now trying to rebuild it from the ashes. "I don't need promises, Caspian," she said gently. "I need truth. No more lies. No more silence." He nodded, eyes burning with conviction. "You have my truth. All of it." "Then tell me this," she whispered. "Why now? Why after all this time?" His voice dropped to a rough whisper. "Because the curse isn't what I thought it was. It's not a punishment for loving too deeply. It's a warning. A prophecy." Her brow furrowed. "A prophecy?" He nodded. "My ancestors made a vow to the moon goddess. If a Thornwood king ever bonded with a woman bearing the mark of the crescent, their union would awaken something ancient, something powerful. You bear that mark, Dahlia, and our children, they're the key." A shiver ran down her spine. Key to what? His gaze drifted toward the distant horizon, where thunderclouds gathered even though the night was still. To an old power long thought dead, one that's been waiting to rise again. The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of storm rain and danger. Dahlia instinctively cradled her belly, feeling the twins move beneath her palm. She looked up at him, fear and wonder blending in her voice. "So it's not over." "No," Caspian said quietly. "It's only beginning." They stood together under the cold, watchful moon, the cursed king and the Omega who had defied destiny. Snow swirled around them, glittering like falling stars. And somewhere deep in the forest, a low howl echoed, ancient, warning, and impossibly close. Caspian's hand tightened around hers. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Dahlia met his gaze, her lips curving in a faint, fierce smile. "Then let them come." As they disappeared into the shadowed woods, the wind carried the scent of moonflowers and the promise of a story far from over. She thought her story ended with heartbreak, but destiny had other plans. What happens when love defies prophecy? When a curse becomes a crown? If you want to find out what's waiting for Dahlia, Caspian, and their unborn heirs, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the Alpha's romance library. Drop your location in the comments and tell us, would you forgive the Alpha King? Until next time, may your bonds be true, your hearts unbroken, and your wolves forever find their mates.